Hello, Motegi World fans, and welcome back to Talking MotoGP. For the first time, I am streaming live to TikTok as well. Until now, we've been streaming live to the Motegi World Facebook page and the YouTube channel. And eventually, after my wife has shouted at me 16 gazillion times, I'm going to give it a go on TikTok. So if you're in the land of TikTok and you prefer that platform, go there, check it out, leave some comments there. If you're for the first time joining in the land of TikTok, welcome. This is Talking MotoGP. It's a show, a MotoGP podcast talk show where we get as much interaction as we possibly can. Been doing it for a couple of years now, and I'm joined as always in the land of Facebook and YouTube by my sidekick, who is Paul Scott. You can't see him in the world of TikTok, but you'll hear him, no doubt about it. So Paul, hello and welcome to you.
Yeah, Rob, thank you very much. Good evening to you and to everyone who's tuned in. I think we've had a couple of different weekends in a row, and certainly MotoGP is typical MotoGP. Nothing is predictable. So, let's see what the discussions, the comments, the topics bring up tonight. I think it's going to be controversial, but very, very interesting.
It's going to be good. And let me tell you why I'm also a little bit rushed and late. I made sure I ate, played with the kids, did the dishes, kissed the wife, did the homework, did whatever I had to, because I know this is going to be a nice long session, because we've got two races to catch up with. Obviously, we missed last week because of my traveling, and it just didn't kind of work out. But we've got a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about Motegi, everything that happened there. A new world champion was crowned. A week later, the whole MotoGP world was turned upside down, and we had new people running at the front, and Mark's now injured for the next couple of rounds. So made sure I've got no interruption. Paul, I hope you've given your wife a nice big kiss and put her to bed. I hope everyone in the land that is of Facebook, YouTube, and now TikTok. And Vanna, hello, thank you so much for the first comment there. Really do appreciate that. Do you guys think Daz are going to have a ride next year? So Vanna, I'll try and keep up with all the comments coming in from all the different platforms. But hello and welcome to everyone once again. As I said, without you, we don't really have a show. And the point of this was always to make it an open and honest conversation of fans. It's not the Rob and Paul show. It's not the Rob show. It's not the Paul show. It's everyone's show. So hello and welcome to you. Wayne Taylor is in pole position. He is ready and waiting a couple of hours ago already. Yvonne Pretorius, always on the podium. She was in second. David Callahan was in third. Just missing out on the podium was Brian Ritchie. Dean Lemon, hi everyone. Looking forward to tonight. Pilot Chiachetti, Dick Crosby, Brett Lawson, Sebastian Trump, Joe Alves, James Thompson, Gary Granger. They're all in the house. Let me just accept some friends on to TikTok. Oh, no, what have I done here?
Don't cut them off now, Rob.
Oh, no, what have I done? I don't want to do that. Now I'm making myself look brighter and whiter.
Yeah, listen, I've always thought you're quite bright.
At least you did. My school teachers never, ever did. I don't know what I've done here in the land of TikTok, but anyway, it can sort itself out. CP Words, everyone is in the house. So hello and welcome, and please, because we've got a lot of catch up from Motegi and this round, keep those comments coming in. If there's a topic of discussion that you would like to talk about that we haven't quite got to, get it in there. We'll try and bring it up, and we'll try and keep the conversation as open and honest as we possibly can, and as we always do. So Paul, I think the first place to start, because we could literally just start anywhere, is with our South African interest, with our boys Brad Binder, Darren Binder, and Rushaim Woodley. We'll start with Rushaim Woodley in Moto3 and then move over to Darren Binder, and then we'll get into Brad and KTM and that whole conversation from Motegi and this latest round in Indonesia. But a tough and trying Motegi for our South Africans. First time out for Rushaim Woodley, heading over to Japan, riding the tricky Motegi circuit. Like, any conditions can welcome you there. This time it was beautiful sunshine. It was a nice dry weekend throughout. Rushaim Woodley, I think, did well there. Again, just all part of this learning curve that we know. But what really impressed me was how he backed it up the following week, went to a tricky Indonesia. I mean, we'll get into how tricky and what a curveball that was. And Q2, good qualifying, and did something not a lot of riders in all the categories were able to do, was finish in the points. And, as they say, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And Rushaim Woodley, and we'll get on to Darren and Brad, but they certainly got going, and it was a good performance from Rushaim Woodley.
Yeah, Rob, and we've been saying it the whole year regarding Rushaim, is that He's had a couple of unlucky breaks, literally breaking bones. He's healed. And since then, we've said, listen, do what you've got to do, bring the bike home. And now that's 2 good races in a row. And as you say, Motegi's always tricky. And then this past weekend, while he was just superb, just showing the ability of this youngster. I don't want to call him a kid. He is still a kid, but just shows the ability. Obviously having, I think it's now probably 4 races in a row where he's brought the bike home. His confidence is growing and you can see it. Now he makes it straight into Q2, has a great result. I think he finished 13th on Sunday in the main race for Moto3, and that's exactly what he needs to do. His confidence must be sky high at the moment. So I think also a nice thing is because his confidence will be so high, he's got 2 weeks to kind of, I'm going to say, come back down to earth, because he needs to go to Phillip Island with the right mindset, but he mustn't go there overconfident like, hey, I've got this in the bag. He needs to reset and say, okay, new track, off we go again. Let's focus. And now I know that I can do this Q2 story. Now I know that top 15 is where I'm comfortable. And I think we're going to just see good things going forward. And, Phillip Island is a really special track. It's fast and flowing. And I think that's going to suit him. I really think he's going to thrive there. So I look forward to seeing the result he brings in a couple of weeks' time.
He really has had everything there is to experience in his first season in Moto3, the ups, the downs, the lefts, the rights. But it was really good to see the last couple of rounds. Yeah, the results necessarily haven't been there in terms of point scoring and that, but he's been in the mix. If you look at some of the names that he's been beating his teammate, he's just staying on the bike, most importantly, kind of sorting his, the body out, the mental side of it out. So been very proud of Rishane Woodley. He's a very mature kid at the end of the day, he is just a kid, but he's surrounded by a great family, a great team there. And it's great to see him starting to just gain a bit of confidence, momentum. And as you said, go to Phillip Island, a track that, again, it's a wild card track in many ways because everyone can go fast there. It seems to be a leveler in many ways, and the likes of Rishane Woodley can get themselves to the forefront of it. So let's see what he can do there. Let's move on to Darren Binder. I know Vanna in the world of TikTok has already asked about, Darren Binder. Is there any news on his future? For everyone so far, I've heard nothing. I know the big talk was a possible move to British Superbikes. That still seems to be the thing. I haven't, to be honest, the whole conversation's gone very quiet. Even in the live MotoGP broadcast, whenever Darren Binder's mentioned, no one's really brought up anything about his future. So not too sure what's happening there. Again, very tricky. Motegi didn't really get to show himself there. Tough Friday, tough Saturday, didn't have a good Sunday either there, unfortunately. But it followed it up into Indonesia. And again, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And it was good to see Darren show a little bit of what we know is there and what we've been going on the whole time about there's a rider there, there's a rider there, there's a rider there. And I know a lot of riders crashed and whatever, but it was a race where you had to be mature. There were a lot of boxes that you had to tick in a very tough Indonesia, and Darren did that. Got a great start, fought his way through, stayed on the bike, and it was a great result for Darren Binder, and hopefully can take some good confidence from that into Phillip Island, where he has had some really good results in Moto3 especially. So hopefully this could be something where Darren kicks off. We know life in Moto2 in that paddock is probably over. He hasn't got a ride with the Gresini team next year. But let's hope that this is kind of shop window kind of time, and this Indonesia ride and Phillip Island and the rest of the season can kickstart his season and get him a good seat for next year.
Yeah, exactly what you said, a mature ride, because as you say, Indonesia is very tricky. Lots of people crashed. And Darren, who's been fairly crash prone this season, didn't crash. And that to me is a big up to him. And it just shows when he stays on the bike, he should be in the points. There's, I'd say, almost no doubt about it. So very nice to see that. Also, I think it'll do his head a lot of good. And heading off to Phillip Island, where I've yet to come across a rider comment and say, no, they don't particularly like Phillip Island. I see the one thing that can be a problem there is the wind. But after this past weekend, Darren just was superb. I think he'll go there with the right mindset, and I think it'll be another great weekend for him. But once again, nothing in his future that we're aware of. So hopefully something gets sorted, mentioned, and he picks up a good ride for next year. Let's hold thumbs that happens.
I've just got to give a shout out to my beautiful family on TikTok who are watching downstairs. My wife, I'm sure, is very proud of me. So, Ames, thank you for pushing me. Hello, my beautiful Nova. Hello, my beautiful son, Trey. If you are watching, give them a shout out. Hello to my beautiful mother-in-law, Judy Purchase, who's all the way from Mauritius. So, yeah, trying to get this tick. Paul, you got to stick with the times, my friend. As my son said, you've got to have aura. And to have aura these days, you've got to be cool. You've got to be on TikTok. So I'm trying to keep up with the aura. So it's doing well so far. Paul, Jacques got before we move on to the Motegi conversation, Jacques van Wyck's got a very good question, Jan. I don't think it's one we've spoken about it but we've never really been, thrown this question at us. And it goes like this. Why do you think Darren Binder hasn't lived up to what we know he is capable of? And Jacques, it's a very good question. From my side, I've always leaned towards, I learned a lot about Darren, that 13 rounds that I got to spend time with him, doing the MotoGP tour with him. Basically, I was alongside him, and I was really close, and I got to see, and I've known Darren Binder since he was 7 years old or whatever it was. He's been through a lot in that paddock. I know he's always put on a brave face and a smile, and he's a tough cookie, Darren Binder. He really is. But everyone, has, at the end of the day, we're humans. We show emotion. We have emotion. And I think that paddock beat him into submission in a way. I don't think it was, he got to a point where I don't know if he walks into that paddock chest out and confidently. And I'm not saying this is it. This is the feeling I get. I don't think Darren can go be Darren in that paddock, because if he is, he's pummeled. You can't ride. I guess you can't do that. I think the Jake Dixon incident a couple of years ago looked like he was gathering momentum in what is a very tough Moto2 category then. And then that incident came, and that put him, another 2-3 steps back. So every time he's kind of built on momentum, he's always been kicked into the ground, I felt. Even in, his chance that he got in MotoGP, was it a PR exercise? Their team wasn't ready to shine in MotoGP. Yamaha weren't ready to shine. They needed someone to fill the gap. So Darren Binder was there. Let him be the scapegoat of why there's no success. And, so for me, I just think that paddock has just strangled him to the point of submission where, I don't know how seriously the teams take him when they sign him. Is it just a name and they say, okay, well, sit in the corner, you're the number 2? Because he's had some really good rides. You've looked at the Intact team he was with before. They are potentially going to win the championship there. Senna Aegis has gone there and shone. Manuel Gonzalez has gone there and shone. The Cressini team, Manuel Gonzalez was there. He did well. This year, Albert Arenas has stepped up. So he's had the opportunity. Even in Moto3, he had Petronas. He had some really good rides. I just think that paddock is not the place for a Darren Binder personality to shine, just as I think that Jack Miller could potentially go to a World Superbikes and do even better, like a lot of riders have gone and made the switch to BSB, or, Scott Redding's one. He got out of that paddock and made a career out of it, won a BSB title, challenged in World Superbikes. So I do think it's time for Darren to move there, and I honestly hope he can either get into BSB on a good bike. Olimoto was commenting here saying it sounded like Honda BSB was going to be a target for him. Looks like they're going the Scott Redding route now. That would have been a good ride for Darren. World Supersport potentially, somewhere that he can just go, kind of let his hair down. We always know Darren's liked his locks, but let his head down and just be the confident Darren that we know he can be and wants to be. Shout out to my beautiful nephew, Vinny. Hello, Vinny, my boy. Hope you also enjoying. See, when you go on TikTok, you become famous. You see this. It's like a family reunion, Paul. You got to get on TikTok, my son. So give us your opinion there, Paul. I know I ranted on there a little bit, but it's because it's a personal. I take it personally because I love Darren, and it's hard. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think? What does everyone else think?
Rob, I think as a 100% outsider, you've had a lot of insight that time you spent with him. I think you've hit many nails on the head there. I think that paddock has stifled him. I think another thing that he's had to deal with is being Brad Binder's brother. And Brad's had results. He's been a world champion. And Darren's kind of always been in Brad's shadow as much as he's trying to create his own identity. But, those years in Moto3 when we all joked and it was dive bomb Darren, and, he took a lot of flack. He was kind of the whipping boy of Moto3 at that time. And exactly what you're saying, Rob, we don't know what was going on in his head. is he, and I'm going to use this word very subjectively, did he slip into that paddock hoping no one would notice him? Or does he walk in as Darren Binder with a lot of pride and positivity? I don't know. You saw it. But I think something else that's definitely been I don't want to say a limiting factor, but a factor that weighs on his shoulders is being Brad Binder's brother, because, that's kind of what everyone presumes that's how he's made his name. If he wasn't Brad Binder's brother, would he have got the MotoGP ride? Would he have got a decent Moto2 ride? And I think he's earned those rides. But is there that little part of his brain that's saying, did I get the ride because Brad is involved? I don't know. So you're quite right. I think, so what we're actually saying, if I read this correctly, we feel it's more a mental thing as opposed to a physically get on the bike and ride it. We know he can do that. He's done that, not regularly enough, but he's had some fantastic rides. So I don't think it's an ability thing. I think there's more to it.
Ollie Moto and Wayne Taylor make very good points, and I looked at especially this past race, or the past couple, in fact, the whole season. Darren is consistently this between 0.8 and 1.1 seconds off, which in real life to me and you is nothing, is absolutely nothing. We've always said it, but in the world of Moto2, it's night and day, and Moto2 is this, God, it's such a competitive. Again, I watched this weekend, Senna Aegis, who was right up there at the beginning of the year, winning races, looked on form, and now can't almost buy a top 10 or top 15. Alonso Lopez was going to MotoGP. Can't, Darren beat him again this weekend. The World Supersport champion, Huertas, came, and he's a top talent. One World Supersport 300s, one World Factory Ducati rider, World Supersport, won that, dominated there in many ways, came as this big name into Moto2, also just hasn't really hit top form yet. He's had better results. He's had a good couple of top 10s and top 5s, and credit to him. But again, there was Darren beating him this weekend. Jake Dixon has fluctuated. It's just it's a series that, other than the Gonzalez and the Diego Moreiras now, those real guys, you could pick the top 10 out of a hat almost. So it's, but getting back to what Ollie Moto and Wayne Taylor are saying here, and it's by no means something to be embarrassed of or knocking Darren down. To be a 0.8 and a second off the best in the world, and that is, as Ollie Moto says, could that maybe be the limit reached for Darren? Wayne Taylor says, unfortunately, you have to question ability and talent. Could this just be Darren's level, which is between 0.8 and a second off Moto2, which is no mean feat, by the way. I don't think it is, but you have to bring that conversation into it, because clearly the results are showing. So it is. I think in a real world, I think it's probably a combination of all of those little pieces that we've kind of talked about, and it unfortunately just hasn't worked. But let's see where the next move takes him. I think it's a conversation we could have forever. It'll be great to have Darren on the show at the end of the season, or at some point. We've missed him for a couple of seasons now, and just hear his side. I know, like Alex van der Berg was saying when he was at Bruno, watching Darren, the corner speed's there, the braking's there, the bike's horsepower isn't there. What is it? So it'll be great to hear if we can hear from Darren. But for now, season's over, or career seems to be over in that paddock. But I'm hoping he can go find another path somewhere else.
Yeah, let's hold thumbs for that. The worrying thing for me, though, is the silence. There's you want to hear that they're talking about him, even if it's to go to BSB or to World Supersports. But at the moment there, it seems to be radio silence. But maybe there's a lot going on behind the scenes that Bob Moore or whomever might be is sorting out for him. It's just, as you know, Robin, you've got a lot more contacts than we have. Nothing, radio silence, which is never a good thing for any rider who's looking for a ride.
Ollie Moto, you will see me a lot more if Daz does go to BSB. I'll have to make a point to go to those races a bit more, because hopefully we'll have Blaze Baker in there as well. Okay, enough of that, Paul. Let's just quickly move on to end off the Moto2 conversation, because it's a really good one. Moto3 title wrapped up. Rueda has done it now at Indonesia. Brilliant. He's been the dominant force in Moto3. the IO team just have this knack of producing these top
Yeah.
talents. He's another in that kind of that line. They've had Brad Binder, they've had Pedro Acosta, they've now got Rueda, they've had all these top riders, but Rueda really does look like another one of these riders that's going to come in, and MotoGP in 5 or 10 years time is really in good hands with the amount of talent that's coming. But more focus on Moto2, because that's really starting to spice up nicely now. Manu Gonzalez made the mistake in Motegi, panicked, made contact with Vietti, got the punishment there, lost out on a lot of points. Diego Moreira took advantage. Week later, Moreira, again, the fastest man, he's really picked up momentum now that he seems to. The MotoGP, I think the MotoGP contract signed with LCR, I think he's in a good place mentally, physically, everything, and it's showing with the results and the performances. But he goes, dominates. Gonzalez got no answer for him, but this time does the mature thing and doesn't try to force anything and finishes second. Only until, half an hour later, get disqualified because they're running illegal or the wrong software in the motorcycle. That has really kind of, fizzled things up in that Moto2 championship. At one point, Gonzalez looked like he was going to run away with it.
Yeah.
Slowly now, Moreira, with this newfound confidence and everything, that championship, I must say, is really, it's always been a good championship. I've always enjoyed watching it, but this year, it has really kind of excited me because, again, you can pick the top 10 out of a hat. Canet fluctuates, Dixon fluctuates. Yeah. Only two kind of people you can put your money on, your riders you can put your money on, are those two at the front, Moreira and Gonzalez, and it looks like it's going to go down to the wire, where the other two championships haven't.
Yeah, definitely looks like it's going to be a to the wire story. Something that I read, and I think I'm correct in saying this. In the first 5 races of the year, Gonzalez won 3. He's only won 1 since then. But Moreira's picked up more points in the last 5 rounds than anybody else. Obviously, he's been so consistent. So it's quite interesting to see how the tide seems to have swung towards Moreira, definitely. And I think Gonzalez, it'll be a tough one to put behind him this past weekend, to go from 20 points to 0 through, I'm going to say, no fault of his own. And the story is they updated the software and one of the files didn't update. I don't know how that works. And it didn't tell the engineer that that's what had happened. So anyway, be that as it may, he's docked the 20 points. I think there's 9 points in the championship now. So with 4 rounds remaining, Gonzalez is really, I think the pressure's now on him. Where he, as you say, he looked like he was just running away with it. It was coming very easy. And all of a sudden he's going to be, he's certainly under pressure.
Paul, you talk about the pressure on the rider. It's also on the team. It looks like this Intact team seemed to be feeling the pressure. Was this a pressure because of what happened at Motegi? So it's not just the rider that feels this. There's a championship on the line here. It's Trans and Moreira are just like, well, we've got nothing to lose. Let's go. The pressure's on, and these kind of mistakes seem to be coming in. So a lot to fight for, a lot still to play for in Moto2, and that's going to be really exciting. Again, Phillip Island. I mean, I cannot wait for Phillip Island. It's always one of the better rounds of the world. So absolutely. That's brilliant. Going back to last week's Motegi, I mean, we all know what happened there. I'm not going to dive into each and everything. We'll pick apart Indonesia a little bit more because there was a lot more happened there. But the 2 major talking points from Motegi were obviously that of Marc Marquez and Pecco Bagnaia. And I'm going to start with Pecco Bagnaia first, because that'll also lead us into the conversation from Indonesia. Because, I mean, yin and yang, it's absolutely incredible. And I've really tried to put my finger on this and figure it out. And I don't think anyone in the paddock, no matter who you are, can quite figure out what's going on with Pecco. But how I look at it is, changes were made for Pecco in Motegi. We know these rumors and the story that he tested a Franco Morbidelli 2024 GP24 Ducati at the Misano test. They literally somehow wheeled Morbidelli's bike around the back, put it in the factory Ducati garage, and off he went out of it. That's what Uccio, the team boss of VR46, came out and said. I don't think Ducati were too impressed with him coming out and saying that, because they like to dictate and control the narrative that goes out to the press, and that they always have been very much like that, Ducati. And now Uccio comes out in his Italian way and does his thing. But again, this, Pecco Bagnaia is run by VR46. They manage him, so it's in their best interest to get their rider performing again. And Uccio said I can't remember, I think Red Bull Ring, saying, Pecco, please, I'm looking at the data. You're not braking enough. You're not doing this enough. You're not. So anyway, whatever happens, whether he rode it or not, because Tardozzi came out and said he didn't ride Franco's bike, but we did, swap some components and tried some different things. And it was this mismatched hybrid GP24/GP25. The only real big difference between a GP25 is that the motor is designed more for longevity compared to the GP24s. He was definitely running a GP25 engine, but with forks and a couple of bits and bobs from the GP24. Plug it into Pecco's bike and the world makes sense again. Pecco Bagnaia goes and does what Pecco Bagnaia does, dominates the weekend. Brilliant. Pecco Bagnaia is back. The world makes sense again. I was very happy. It's something we wanted to see. It can only bring excitement to have your two-time previous world champion back on form. Let's go. Let's put pressure on Marc Marquez. Great. What I will say, because we all know what happened in Indonesia, and we'll talk about that, but what I will say is, we've spoken about it before, Paul and everyone. When the stars align for Pecco Bagnaia on the Friday, it sets up his whole weekend, and we see the Pecco that we saw there. Everything was set up. He got the feel that he wanted. Everything was set up. He was fast. He qualified pole. He got the whole shot. He was never bothered. He never had to deal with a front tire pressure. He didn't have to deal with trying to overtake people. It was just the perfect environment for Pecco to do what Pecco does. And why I say that, and I'm not saying that he can't win or he can only win in those situations, but what Motegi and Indonesia, it was a week apart. What it did prove is when Pecco gets on the bike, especially on Friday, and things are going right, he can make it work. And he qualifies pole and gets a week. If things are tricky, and this is where Pecco has really been exposed this year, if there is problems to be solved, Pecco cannot solve those problems. Last year and the year before, I think now that I look at what's happening is what different anomalies, because he really only had Martin to worry about and go for. Yeah. He didn't have better performing Hondas and better performing KTMs and better performing Yamahas and Aprilias especially kind of getting in the way. It was really just a straight shootout between him and Martin. Mark was thrown in the odd little one last year, but Pecco was on this wave, and I only have to worry about Martin. Cool. Now all these different anomalies came in this year, because he started the year off okay, wasn't happy, but as everyone's kind of progressed and got faster, Pecco's just got worse. And that's I honestly think it's just a mindset thing. I think he's overthinking things and everything, and he just can't get this rhythm that he wants. Because how one rider can go from that weekend of domination to this, the only thing that I can put on it is purely a case of when the stars align, great. When they don't, I can't sort it out. This past weekend, Mark also wasn't happy with his Ducati, but he was finding ways around it. Digi and Franco were finding ways, not the best, not race-winning ways, but not stone last ways. So we've seen, again, the yin and yang, the best and the worst of Pecco Bagnaia in the space of a week.
Yeah, Rob, which is really something that is, I don't want to say it's mind-blowing, it's mind-boggling that he can do that. And just think, the week before Motegi or the race before was Misano, home track for him. And if I remember correctly, he got no points.
No, he got nothing.
So he's gone from no points to full house the next week after. Fastest ever lap record, pole position, sprint and race win, and not even just a win, he destroyed everyone. And then the rumors were exactly what you said. He's ridden Morbidelli's bike. They put the 24 forks on, the 24 swing arm, which when I heard that story, I thought, but surely they could have tested that or let him use it 10 races ago. Why are they only doing it now? I understand it could have been a result of the test on the Monday after Misano. However, that didn't gel with me. I just thought that doesn't sound right. They could have put the forks on the bike for one session 10 races ago. Anyway, so then he has a great weekend at Motegi. Come this weekend, and lots of pundits were saying, one swallow does not a summer make. Let's see Pecco do the same thing this weekend. And exactly what you say, Rob. Friday fell apart, and we saw the worst of Pecco. And when I say the worst, he just doesn't seem like, as you say, when things are not comfortable for him, he has no workaround. Mm-hmm. And I've said it many times. Last year, he raced Martin. That was all. You're quite right there. Now he's got, as you say, there's Aprilias, there's Mark as a teammate, there's other Ducatis, the Hondas are better. is he getting exposed? I'm going to say either Wayne Taylor or one of the guys earlier in the year said, Pecco's being exposed. Yes, it is a mental thing, but he's just being exposed because he's only ever raced MotoGP on a Ducati at a point where the Ducati was leagues ahead. I've said it before on the show. I think the Ducati's become stagnant. I think everyone else has caught up. Mark has been the deciding factor at most of the races this year. Pecco hasn't. And he just, as you say, he can't adapt. He just doesn't know, whether he wants to go left or right, up or down, shorter, longer. He's clueless. And it's a big worry for Ducati. And I think they're starting to maybe just voice their concern in a little bit more of a, earlier in the season, I think they were, Pecco, don't worry, we'll sort you out. Now I think they've got to a point where what did you do last weekend and what are you doing this weekend? Come on, bud, you need to pull your finger out and get cracking. It's a very difficult one for him, but how he can swing from, and let's face it, last weekend was an anomaly. The rest of his year hasn't been great. Yes, he won in America because Mark crashed. But other than that, he hasn't been great. I mean, Alex has shown him up the whole season, basically. So I think he really has to dig deep for the balance of this year and going into next year if he wants to have any chance of running in the top 3 or 4 again.
I like Robert Mackey. Pecco in Indonesia, it was like a game of Where's Wally.
Exactly.
Paul, so after Motegi and some pretty influential people went on to like the MotoGP supporters page on Facebook, and a lot of people went on pretty quickly onto social media and said, you see, Ducati were only favoring Marc Marquez. You see, and like Johnny Martin says, and that's exactly why Pecco is being screwed by the team. Hidden agenda at work from Ducati. They have to protect their golden boy, possibly make space for Alex Marquez in the team to back up his brother. So now, while I understand Johnny Martin's, and like you said, the more I look at it now, the more I go, okay, Ducati, you've slipped up here. And Ducati have slipped up in the past. I had a Facebook conversation with Sven Brunner about it, where he's kind of going, Ducati are doing the same mistake that Honda did. They're building this bike toward Mark, giving him all the focus, forgetting about everyone else. And this is what's affecting Pecco. And I still do kind of shine away from that. I go, please, you know what? There's no ways Ducati started the beginning of the season with their 2-time Italian champion and gone, we're favoring Marc Marquez. It's never going to happen. They had the same thing. I think Pecco's just fallen away from it. Mark's made it work, and Pecco's fallen away from it mentally, whatever. We've just discussed it. But when people came on after Motegi and went, you see, it's not Pecco. And trust me, this is a Pecco Bagnaia fan. I was elated when I saw Pecco Bagnaia win, because that's the champion I know and love that I haven't seen in a very long time. But I went, that's very premature to put those kind of comments up saying, this is it, now the real Pecco's here, Mark's reign's over. You see, it's this, it's that, it's this, it's that, it's this, it's that. If you had backed it up this weekend with another dominant Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I could start putting one hand up again, and then Phillip Island, okay, another hand up. But it just showed. I mean, their Ducati Pecco came out of this weekend and said, I just don't know. You've got your forks. You've got everything that you had. Okay, you had a different rear tire carcass, which did hamper the Ducatis. It did. We saw that. But a rookie on a Ducati won. Not just one, dominated.
Smashed them.
Mark, okay, unfortunately, the mistake with Rins in the sprint race, which we'll get to as well, that kind of put into any kind of hope of a top 3, but still recovered to something of a good result. Di Giannone and Morbidelli weren't there the whole weekend, but they recovered to somewhat of a result. They managed things. I think that's the best word to use. They managed things better. I mean, the sprint race, what was he, 13 seconds behind second last?
20 something. Behind second last,
And then in the race goes and just falls over, and again, someone posted on the MotoGP supporters group saying, a rider with no confidence and whose mind's gone doesn't just crash a bike. And I went, that's another very silly comment to make, because I've crashed a bike purely because you're riding stiff, you don't believe in yourself, you're doing everything wrong, and you crash. Listen, I'm not saying that's the only reason. It could just be that the bike was crap. But how? How is it possible when there's one winning at the front of the field at the very same weekend where you can go take that data, you can do whatever you want, you can whatever, and a week ago you were dominating? So again, for me, it exposed Pecco this weekend that yes, when things are switched on, he is fast and not a lot of people can catch him, including a Marc Marquez at Motegi. I still believe if Marc wasn't chasing the title there, he could have maybe given Pecco more of a go. I don't want to say he would have beaten Pecco or anything. I just think Marc had one mind on Pecco. You go win the race. I want to wrap this up knowing I'm going to Indonesia, a track that I hate, and there could be bad luck there. And look what happened. So I don't think Marc, I think Marc was at a 90%. I think Pecco was at his best 100%, and that was great seeing that. A couple of failings coming out of Indonesia. Ducati and how they've managed the whole situation, I don't see why they can't just be upfront, especially with the media in the things. Right. Up until now, we were trying to make this GP25 work with Pecco. This is the difference. Pecco and Marc are on the exact same motorbike. I still don't even know that, because up until now, you're told that Marc's on a GP24 kind of 0.9, whereas Pecco's on a GP25, and so they're very vague with that, which I don't understand why. And then why not just come out and said, right, at the Misano test, it's not illegal, but we've bolted the 24 forks and that onto Pecco's bike, and hip hip hooray. So Ducati's management of the whole thing to me has been suspect, and I think they need to sort it out, because especially going forward now, they don't have their blue-eyed boy in Marc Marquez, their champion. They've got Pecco Bagnaia, and how that's going to do for the next round, we don't know. And the second big one is Pecco Bagnaia has to find a different work ethic. There's got to be a plan B for Pecco, or plan C. I think last year's plan B was, or just follow Martin and make the best of it, or whatever their plan. He certainly doesn't have a plan C, because if I go out and, this rear tires, and I mean, I watched some of the behind the scenes stuff. He was literally saying nothing on the bike works. Nothing. How does nothing work? I've been on bikes that don't work before, but when you make a change, it changes something. Nothing changed. The guy was just bad. And we saw it at Catalunya as well. I came out and said, and I don't know what people think, but I came out and said, Pecco down tools. And this last weekend, it looked like Pecco did the same. You know what? This is not on me. This is on you, Ducati. I won last week, and now it's on you. And Ducati are going this finger pointing game. So I think that relationship that was already on kind of thin ice, I don't know how they recover from this, unless Pecco really takes the bull by the horns and does a Bezzecchi and carries factory Ducati now over these races without Marc and carries that mantle. Other than that, I think that relationship actually needs to end for both parties.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to first of all address the conspiracy theory story. So Matt Oxley, I think, summed it up very nicely. He said, at the beginning of the year, Ducati are spending whatever the number is. Let's call it 40 million euros between the two riders. That means 20 million on Marc, 20 million on Pecco. Regardless of win bonuses, that's kind of what it costs their budget to run them for the year. And he's using that as an idea. He then says, do you really think that Ducati at the first race are going to have a little conference and say, okay, we're going to sabotage Pecco for the benefit of Marc at 20 million euros, whatever the amount is, per season? That's like throwing money away. So his analogy, I thought, was very good. I could never see it happening. Not the Italian rider in an Italian team on an Italian bike. Yeah. They are very patriotic. Yeah. They are not. I could fathom it if it had been a Casey Stoner or even a Marc Marquez, or who had been the glory boy and now the focus changed. But in Italy, I just can't. I can't see that happening in a full factory team. Me personally. The way they've handled it, I agree fully with you. Why don't they just come out and say, listen, this 2025 edition of the bike is not our best bike. We can see it. We, as the layman watching MotoGP, we can see that. Last year's bike is better. Alex has proved it. Fermin's proved it. So we're not idiots. So, we're not going to now suddenly say, Ducati make cut bikes. They still dominate. They've already won everything for this year in terms of Constructors' Championships. So I agree with you in the handling of that. The way Pecco needs to deal with this, that I have no clue about. Because as you say, Rob, when he's good, he's great. But he's never been, and I've often used the analogy with Luca Cadalora, because I think Pecco's way better. He's won way more. He's won championships. He just seems to get to a point now where he's lost. I think he's lost mentally. I think he's lost confidence in the bike. For whatever reason, he can't overcome whatever the problems are. Last week just worked. Everything fell into place. But, as we've said many times, you can't have one weekend a year like that. And I do think he's feeling pressure from the Marco Bezzeckis, the Furman Aldegears. The Hondas are definitely better. Just as an aside, Pecco's race pace this weekend, race pace Sunday, 0.4 of a second slower than Somkiat Chantra. Now, no disrespect to Chantra, like you said with Darren Binder, these are the best of the best. We're talking 4/5 of a second off the fastest oak in the world. So you're a top rider. But Chantra is the back of this talented field. And Pecco at this particular track was slower than him. Should never happen. Not in a million years, just on talent alone. Pecco should be half a second faster than him on his worst day. Now that I don't believe you can point that to the bike. Personal opinion. I think you got to look at what's making the bike go around the track when it comes to that kind of statistic.
And it's a very good point that you bring up there. And Paul, we've spoken about it before. Everyone in the comments, please just keep those comments coming. I'm putting them up on the screen, and I am going to touch upon a couple of them. Everyone in the land of TikTok, hello and welcome. We are talking MotoGP. We're on the Pecco Bagnaia conversation now. Fabio Quartararo on a Yamaha, even when it's not working, can dig deep and ride and get a fast lap, a couple of fast laps, something. Brad Bender has wrestled the KTM around to top 5 championship results at the end of the season for a whole season, get the best. Riders dig deep and make things work. Pecco does not this year, to me, and I'm still a Pecco fan. He's a worthy champion. Please don't take this the wrong way. But Pecco has proven this year he can't find this ability to really dig deep. He's dug deep in his career before. There's no doubt about it. But really dig deep when your back is really up against the wall. You go out on Friday in Indonesia and this bike is just not working. You just somehow find a way to make it work for a 6th, a 7th. I mean, even an 8th would have been a great result this past weekend. To ride around at the back, like I said, 0.4 off a rider that, with all due respect, shouldn't have been in MotoGP and is leaving MotoGP, while the rookie on a bike that you've won a world championship on and essentially very much the same bike that you're on is dominating at the front, a rookie. Now, it's exposed Pecco, it's exposed Ducati, it's exposed Pecco. And I agree with all the comments coming in. I still don't agree, as you said, with the fact that a couple of comments that people have made just saying it's definitely Ducati, favoring Mark and kind of wanting to isolate Pecco. Ducati's ideal situation at the beginning of this year was Mark first, Pecco second. They want the factory red bikes first and second. The fact that Alex Marquez, none of us saw Alex Marquez. Yeah. I don't care if you have a crystal ball at home and you said, I saw Alex Marquez finishing second. No ways. Never. We started this year, and a lot of people started this year going, Alex Marquez has got to prove himself as a MotoGP rider. And he's done it. Yes, he's in the ideal team. He's on the ideal bike now. He's come out and said, I don't want a red factory Ducati. I don't want to be in that environment because it'll break him. In a way, like it's broken Pecco. It broke Nea Bastianini in a way. That factory Ducati ride, it holds a lot of weight. It really does. It's broken riders. So Alex Marquez doesn't want that. There's certain personalities that can deal with those roles. And Mark Marquez, I'm going to say Valentino Rossi because he is obviously one of the greats. He didn't make it work when he went to Ducati. That's why it's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek kind of thing. But those kind of personalities can take that mantle and run with it. Whereas the likes of Alex Marquez and the Bastianinis, with all due respect, they can't. And that's where we've been so impressed by Bezzecchi because I labeled him as one of those riders that couldn't take the mantle, but yet he did. So there's a lot to sort out there for Pecco. Pecco's got to sit and figure this out for himself. It's no more up to Ducati. If Ducati can just give him the same bike from Motegi and he must just figure it out because the answer's right there. Clearly, the answer's right there. You did it. And to me, it boils down to work ethic. On the he went into that Motegi weekend. It's a circuit that he's done well at and he's favored, but he's won at Indonesia as well. So you can't really say that. but everything, he just did everything right there. I think he's working. He didn't let his mind, everything was right. He's got to find that again, and he's got to make it work, because if he doesn't, then we get this Pecco, like Wayne Taylor and a couple of other people are saying, is it a Maverick Vinales situation at Yamaha where you check out? And it's easy to at this level now. At this level, these guys are having to perform at 110% on every lap, every session. So if you're 1, 2, 3% checked out, you're nowhere in modern MotoGP. You know what I mean? We spoke about it with Darren now in Moto2. If you're 0.8 of a second off, and you're in 24th place.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Pecco Bagnaia was absolutely nowhere this past weekend. And it can happen like this. So there's answers needed. I do think, like I said, Ducati need to sort themselves out and be a bit more transparent, certainly with the press or with someone, and because they're not handling it well at all. But Pecco, I think, as I said, as a Pecco fan, I need him to grab it by the balls, grab the bull by the horns, or whatever terminology you want to use, and he needs to get going. Brian Ritchie, just quickly, the answer to that question of whose era is that? That's my best mate in the entire world, Sheridan Moraes. He's World Supersport ride at Assen, gave me his beautiful helmet. I only waited 20 years of friendship to get a helmet from him. So if there's Rob, I'd be on RZ50s without you. So that's my Shares helmet there. So yeah, I mean, Paul, we could talk about the Pecco and Ducati argument all night long. And Oli Moto, the problem with Pecco blaming Ducati is that he's being beaten by his teammate. The bike cannot be a problem if he's being used to destroy everyone else. And I mean, that's the easiest answer to give everyone that is on the bandwagon of, it's Ducati's fault and it's not fair. Pecco's being outdone by you. How?
Yeah. You know, Robin, we've said it for a few weeks in a row, a few races now. Pecco's been the worst of the Ducatis.
Yeah.
So stop blaming the factory. It's not like it's only Mark that's beating him. How often in the last 5 or 6 races has it been all the Ducatis that have finished? So maybe Furman's crashed, or Morbidelli's run De Gea Antonio off the track, or whatever the case might be. But he's been the last of the Ducatis. Now, previous years, we've always said when Martinez upped the pace, I'm going back to last year and possibly 2023, the next week, Pecco upped the pace. And the week after, they seemed to egg each other on. It seemed like, to me, and I've said it before, Pecco had a mental edge over Martin and Quartararo and whoever it was the years before. So when he needed to, he could up his game. But now he's come against Mark, and he doesn't know how to mentally get ahead of Mark. And what's happened now is actually gone backwards. So instead of now focusing, and we've said it, I think we said it, I don't know, Rob, 6 races ago. Stop focusing on Mark. Yeah. Focus on Alex. You've got to start beating the other Ducatis. And he just, now, I say this tongue in cheek, now he's got to focus on Chantra. And so I've got to beat this up, In all fairness, Pecco should never be the worst of the Ducatis. No. At the odd track, yes, it's going to happen. And Aldeguer, to me, has just grown in stature week after week after week, especially probably the last 4 or 5 rounds. But it shouldn't even be in Pecco's mind. No. Pecco shouldn't even be thinking about a Furman Aldeguer. He should be saying, well, it's Mark and me, and that's it. And I think that mental fortitude has escaped him for whatever reason. And I'm hoping it's not like, and we mentioned it at the end of last year when Martin said, I've achieved my life's goal. I hope Pecco hasn't got to a point now where he's, listen, I'm a 3 times world champion, 2 times MotoGP and Moto2, so I'm happy. I've achieved, so what if he beats me this year? I'll try again next year. I hope that's not the mental scenario that's going through his head now, because we've said it, Rob, you've said it 100 times. He needs to change his attitude. And that's easier said than done, and especially if you get there on Friday morning, and I'm sure he gets there, rah, here we go. And after 3 laps, he's like, we got the same problems, and it's going to be difficult. I hope I'm proved wrong. But this weekend will be a big thing for him, or next weekend in Phillip Island, because he needs to come out punching. He can't come out and spend Friday morning, like you say, Rob, riding around in 14th, 15th, 16th, trying to find 4/10, 5/10 of a second to hopefully get into Q2. If that doesn't happen on Friday morning, you kind of know he's writing his weekend off.
You know what, Paul? This is the ideal situation for Pecco to go shine. Mark's out of the equation for the next 2 races. So forget about him. Go be Ducati's number one rider now. Go show your worth. Go prove your worth. Ducati, give him Mark's bike. Yes, what a PR stunt that would be. There is Mark's bike, the bike that has won the World Championship. Now go tell us it's cock. You know, that's never going to happen. But I'm just saying, this is the perfect opportunity for a Pecco Bagnaia to go, you know what? Put my big boy pants on, like you said a couple of weeks ago. Now's my time to shine. So I hope it happens. Ducati needed to happen.
Yeah, the problem then is, Rob, then it shows that it's a mental issue. Because then what's he going to do so the next 2 races, we know Mark's there. What happens the week after? I'm not sure where that's going to be. I can't think offhand. Is he now going to go back into his shell because suddenly, my fast teammate's back? I hear exactly what you're saying. That's exactly what he needs to do. But how's he, I don't know. He's got such a problem at the moment. I don't know, because if he gets there on Friday morning, Firmin and Alex are 0.6 of a second quicker than him. He's not going to be able to sort that out. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah. CP Butts, Rob, you said last year Ducati is going to have a problem managing both riders. The Ducati just have a problem with management. They always have, and they always will. And this year has again highlighted that fact. Paul, quickly ending off the conversation of Motegi, where we can really dive into Indonesia because there was so much that happened there. But Marc Marquez. Now, it's a very touchy subject for a lot of people. I know. But let me just give you my thoughts, and everyone, please, again, open chat, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, get your comments in. I'll try and catch up with them. Paul, you're going to have your say. This is how I viewed it. Marc Marquez won his 7th MotoGP World title, his 9th overall. This whole Liberty Media thing of getting rid of his, it's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. But I love that Mark came up, and it's more than just a number. I love that. It was kind of like one of these to Liberty Media, which is great. But anyway, Mark wins it. I don't care who you are. If you're the toughest guy on the planet, like Sheridan, I've always said Sheridan to me is the toughest guy, and Ricky Morais probably the toughest guy. I took Sheridan to watch Marley and Me, that movie with Jennifer Aniston and Owen Wilson, where the dog dies. The dog dies in the movie, and he didn't cry. He did not cry. Myself, Emily, Ads, Shez's beautiful wife, we all cried. I looked at Shez, he wasn't crying. I was like, you inhumane bastard. It's emotional. So now, I bring this up because when Mark sat behind that big screen and all the emotion that Mark showed over that weekend when he was being interviewed, and he just couldn't hold himself back, the tears came, and he said, I finally feel at peace. And then the journalist, the female Spanish girl, and I never know her name, but then she goes, your granddad. And then Mark, I was thinking about his granddad who told him to stop. And it was just, anyway, it was brilliant. But when Mark was sitting behind that screen and that incident came where he crashes that Honda and that arm just flops, and looking at everything, 4 surgeries later, everything that happened, the leaving Honda, the big check, going to everything that happened, we all know the story. I'm not going to dive into it. If you are a true MotoGP fan, so you're not one that's just come in now and I like that rider just because you've dug deep, you're like us, and a lot of people that are on this, you go back years, and like me, I can happily say I will wear a Marquez and a Rossi cap. I know you're a Marquez man, you won't put the Rossi cap on, but I can do that because I love them both. And I've got no problem with people that. But one thing you have to do is when you see that, and Olimoto, I know you're the biggest Mark critic in terms of you respect his ability and everything. I'd love to hear like your side, and anyone else that's a complete against Marc Marquez. When you sat and watched Mark sitting behind that TV and all the emotion there, did it not make you emotional? Did it not make you that here's a human being that for me has massively matured over the last couple of years? Yes, he did some very immature things in his racing career. He took people out. He did some stupid things. So did Rossi. I had someone on my Facebook page say, Marc Marquez, disgusting. Did you see how he ran Jean Mir wide at Motegi? That block pass was absolutely disgusting. And I went, hang on. That was, first of all, one of the greatest block passes ever. We've all done it,
Yeah.
Second of all, it's racing. Second of all, Valentino Rossi, Max Biaggi, Velcom.
Yeah.
Rossi invented Marc Marquez and the block passes and Rossi did it to Gibernard Jerez. Marquez did it to Lorenzo. forget all that. As a MotoGP fan, as a fan of these superheroes and these warriors that go to battle every week, I sat there and I went, you have to respect this. Even if you don't want to respect the guy, you have to respect this and what he's done and where he's came from. Me, you, Paul, and I'm going to speak for everyone in the chat on all the channels. We would have folded.
Yeah,
On that
100%.
that first operation, I would have gone, no, this is a caca there. I go to the ATM, I would have drawn out my bank balance, looked there, 16 billion zeros, and gone, this is lekker, I'll just stay at home.
Yeah.
This guy forgot all about that. This guy dug deep, went for 3 more operations. This guy was doing push-ups. To his credit, he came out and said it was the dumbest thing in the world. This guy was doing push-up a week after that, trying to ride. The guy's mental fortitude and passion to go and race and win, you have to respect. And I watched that this weekend, and I went, God, the maturity of this guy. And he proved it again in Indonesia. But then when I go see the comments afterwards, I go, fair, you can have your comment and you can say whatever you want about Mark, but to me, you're not a true MotoGP fan. I'm talking about a true fan that, yes, don't go buy the shirt or the cap or buy into the whole Mark thing, but you've got to sit there, first of all, and feel a bit of emotion about it. And second of all, go, you know what, young man, I'm still not my cup of tea, and I'll boo you every time you crash or throw stuff at you. But you know what? That takes a real man. It takes a warrior to do what that guy did. And I will forever give it. If that's the last World Championship he wins, so be it. But yeah, it makes me emotional because it was, I've been in a situation where I've laid on a hospital bed for 17 days in ICU with a pipe coming out my lung, draining blood, and that was too much for me. I still live that. I'm still haunted by that today. This guy just went and won the greatest prize in motorcycle racing. Yeah, he was on the best bike, and I don't want to hear that. Pecco's on the best bike. Rossi was on the best bike for years on Honda when he did all his famous years. And I don't want to hear that argument. The guy still went and made it work. And I don't care who you are, you've got to respect that.
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. The emotion that he showed just shows you what this meant to him. And people can say what they want, love him or hate him. That just shows he's such a driven person. He was, for him, he's not trying to prove a point that he's the best motorcycle racer in the world. He was trying to prove a point to himself that he believed he could still do it. And he needed to go and show that, which he did. On the point you made about the people who are not Marquez fans, not getting emotional when they watch that, I think the guys who absolutely hate him, as soon as he won the championship, they walk out the room. They don't watch that. So they don't appreciate that. But I think what has happened is he certainly has matured. And we're seeing a Marc Marquez now that is trying to improve the sport, not just because he's so fast. Like with his comments on Sunday after his crash with Marco Bezzecchi, straight away he says, don't hate the oak. It's racing. It happens. Mark's been in many altercations. Never once have you heard him blaming someone else. He'll walk away if he doesn't think it was his fault. If it's his fault, for his whole career, he's taken accountability for what he's done. He's always been a rider to step up and say, I'm sorry. Maybe a little bit different with the issue with Rossi at that time. But everyone else, but certainly the Marquez 2.0 now is way more mature. But that's what age does. You take any 20-year-old first year as a professional sportsman, I don't care what sport it is, and take him if he's still competing in the same sport at 32 years old. And having been through the injury, the debilitating career-ending, not career-ending scenario Mark went through, of course he's matured. So, he's, as I say, I think he's trying to bring the sport up a level by being that guy that, hey, let's not, cheer for who you like. I got no problem with that. But don't boo the Oaks. Don't throw things at them. Don't, keyboard warriors spewing this absolute hate. But it's easy behind a keyboard, Rob. So I do think he's been good for the sport, specifically these last 2 years. Whether people agree with that or not, I'm not too concerned. That's how I see him. But understand, I've always been a Marquez fan. from 2013, because like, first and foremost, he was on a Honda, which my blood is red. But still, I think what we're seeing now is Marc Marquez making the sport better for everybody. And that's, you got to credit the guy for that. He's been through so much, but to me, he just seems like he's thoroughly enjoying himself, and he's achieved something that he wanted, not for anybody else, but for Marc Marquez. And not in a selfish way, in a motivational way.
Exactly. Olimoto, thank you for saying this. I think Mark has made a great comeback. Second to Doohan, nearly lost his leg. And I do think there has been, Sven Grun had this conversation with me on Facebook. I do agree with him that because it was labeled as the greatest comeback, and people do forget what Doohan went with. And I do agree, because it was back then compared to now. It was, you can put both in, because Doohan also went on to do what he did, and I don't think we can forget or put aside what Doohan did. It's hard comparing them, but I hear what you're saying, and I hear what Sven was saying is, yeah, it's fun, but don't call it the greatest comeback. Don't forget about Doohan. Great. And then also there was Olimoto commenting here, because Ollie, I love you, but I'm going to digitally arm wrestle you if you're not careful here. It will be interesting to see what happens when Mark isn't by far the quickest. I want to see how he races when he's got competition. Will he start running people? My live's going to end it. Will he start running people off track again? I expect so. Olimoto, I'm going to digitally murder you now. Okay. First of all, I want to see how he races when he's got competition. Ollie, he has got competition. I know you don't think it is, but trust me, it's there, and he's beaten them. I fast forward, or rewind, I should say, to 2014 when he came into MotoGP. Yes, it was on the Repsol Honda, and he landed his arse in butter. He came onto the best bike. He came in a season where, sorry, now this flipping TikTok's asking me to do a goddamn puzzle to verify myself. He came into a season.
It says 3 to 5 years. We haven't got that much time.
He came into a championship where Lorenzo, Pedrosa, Rossi, and he wiped the floor with him. He dominated. We're doing an article for the magazine now that I'm putting together for my brother, and you just read the guy's record. He dominated from 2014 to 2019. Yes, there was a blip, but he dominated. This year. There is competition. It hasn't been the competition that it could or should be in terms of Martin was missing, Pecco. But yeah, I understand that side. The guy's beaten anyone that's come. And who was it? Someone made such a valid point. Was it Lorenzo? Yes, I think it was Jorge Lorenzo. And talking about respect for Mark, the comments that have come in from the likes of Lorenzo, this is a guy that nearly had his arm taken off by Marc Marquez and among other things when he was racing with him, to come out and say on his social media, you're a effing machine. Well done. Hats off. You're an inspiration. But he came out and he said, Mark has never been beaten by his teammate.
Yeah.
Mark has never, ever been beaten by He's always been the number one guy in his team. Yeah, okay, obviously when he was out injured and stuff, but in a season where he's fit and healthy, he's never been beaten by a teammate. Pedrosa.
Yeah.
Lorenzo.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's had teammates and he's never been beaten them. So, Olimoto, I understand what you're saying. I'm still going to digitally murder you, or I might even murder you the next time I see you in real life, but it'll be a soft murder. We can roll around a bit and I'll put you in a lock or something because I like you. You're my mate. But you know what, Paul, going back to what you said just now, I think the big word, and Marco Bezzecchi summed it up perfectly: maturity. Yeah. Bezzecchi came out and said, he actually in a way said, you know what, I had the blinds pulled over my eyes for years. For years, I hated this guy. Because I had to hate this guy. He took Rossi's 10th title. I had to hate him. And I did hate him because, to me, he did. The more Bezzecchi's competed with him, the more he's now this year challenging him. He's gone, and he said it, a couple of rounds ago.
Yeah.
I've matured. Now that I'm mature, I can see, and I have nothing but respect for this guy. And I think that's a lot of what keyboard warriors and all these people forget or don't have. They don't have the maturity to look at this guy and go, Ati Herbst, well done. And for anyone else that I've missed, but Ati Herbst, not a fan, but he is MM93. Wow, he is a warrior. Still don't like him. We're blessed to see the best decade of racing bikes. That is a mature comment to make. I will never be a fan. You don't have to be a fan. I'm not telling you to be a fan, but as a mature super fan of MotoGP, you cannot sit there and tell me that this guy does not deserve a comment like that. If a Bezzecchi, a VR46 Academy rider, can come out and say, I've matured now. I'm mature enough now to kind of make up my own mind, and my mind is this way.
Yeah.
That's all that needs to be said. So that's a big word. If I can give anyone that are those keyboard warriors or have any other view, maturity. Just keep that in mind.
Yeah, Rob, and on that point, people are entitled to their opinion, and nobody has to like anybody or support them. But you know, I just don't agree with the spewing absolute hate towards anybody. You know, it doesn't matter who. We don't know them personally. And they putting their lives on the line week in and week out to do the best that they can do. And we get to appreciate the show sitting on a couch. We're not really going to get injured doing that. So, yeah, I think we need to sometimes just tone it down a little bit.
Very well said. And I think to end off the Mark Marquez conversation, because Ollie, I agree with you. I don't want to make it all about Mark. There's plenty else to talk about, especially from this past weekend. But I mean, this is the world of MotoGP. This is the cutthroat world of MotoGP. On the high that Pecco was and Mark were at Motegi. And in a way, you have to feel sorry for Pecco, first of all. Well, even more so, Joan Mir gets his first podium on a main race podium on a Honda since 2021. And everyone has to forget it because Mark has wrapped up his 9th world title. So there's poor Joan Mir, like, look at me. Look at me. You know, and he is worth the spotlight because Joan Mir is another rider that we've battered, we've bruised, he crashes, he does this. And he really has found form. He's turned it around, and to get on that podium, he was brilliant in Motegi. You know, same with Pecco. Pecco, yeah, I'm finally back on the podium. Guys, respect me. And there's Mark more than a number. And you just couldn't write it. But fast forward a week, and Mark goes to a track that he came on and said, I just don't like this place. It doesn't like me for some reason. And then the guy goes and barrel rolls and is out for 2 races now. And look, luckily he wrapped it up. I think this decision to take the 2 rounds out is purely because he's got that luxury of taking the 2 rounds out. But to wrap up the Mark conversation, didn't go for him, crashed, taken out, whatever. 2 topics. And again, everyone in the comments, please, Paul, we're going to get your side. First conversation topic is the move on Alex Rin in the sprint race. Yeah, it was hard. To me, not a long lap penalty. That's my first opinion. Second opinion is, again, how he handled the Bezzecchi situation. Came out and said, again, this is the mature. Maybe you didn't like Mark when he was a little bit immature, when he was 21, 22, 23, doing silly things. I can tell you some stupid things I was doing at that age. None of us were mature at that age. Okay, but we weren't scrutinized. Mark has matured. Bezzecchi has matured. A lot of these riders have matured. For both of them to come and go, Bezzecchi to go to him and apologize, and this is straight. While Mark is sitting there after just being battered off, shoulder going, I don't know if my arm's right. Bezzecchi came over him there, which you look at the likes of Dixon and some other riders that have retaliated and done. In that moment where you should be fuming and mad and ready to headbutt this guy that's taken you out, Bezzecchi comes and says sorry. Mark goes, don't worry, my China, I understand. It was brilliant. It was brilliant. And I know people are going to say, yeah, but it's easy to do that because he's already wrapped up the title. The guy's just nearly killed you. Mark was easily gone. You know what I mean? And that's something that Rossi did so well throughout his whole career. He was never in the newspapers for, you know, abusing a woman or taking drugs or something. For his whole career, he was a consummate professional. He was the absolute professional. And Mark's doing that now. So again, those are the 2 last key points that I would like to talk about for Mark. So first, the main one is obviously the Rins. What did you think of it? And everyone in the comments, what did you make of it?
Yeah, listen, I think it was a hard pass. Did it deserve a long lap penalty? I'm sitting on the fence when it comes to that. I think if it hadn't have happened on the first lap, he might have got away with it. You know, on the first lap, everyone's trying to make up for bad qualifying or bad starts or whatever the case might be. Certainly, he was hard. He took a gap that 50-50 was or wasn't there. He certainly didn't punt Rins off the track. Yeah, he forced his way through. But then he served his long lap penalty and he just got on with it. Unfortunately, it ruined Rins's race. And Rins seems to have had good pace this past weekend, which is, that's been since he won in Kota last year. That's been few and far between, or the year before even. Nice to see that he's finding a bit of form, but once again with Rins, unlucky for him, but he just hasn't delivered. Yeah, he was good on Sunday this weekend, but let's see in 2 weeks' time. He hasn't had a great season, but I think Mark was racing. They are there to race, and Mark, maybe a little bit of desperation because it's not a great track for him, needed to make a move. Every other sprint race, his moves have worked. He's been aggressive, but he's been clean. Where this one, he maybe wasn't the cleanest we've ever seen from him, to the detriment of Rins. But as you say, Rob, this is racing. It's going to happen. Unfortunately, like with Bezzecchi, sometimes it doesn't work. And I agree with, if you watched Neil Hodgson's summary of the Bezzecchi Marquez thing, it was almost like a freak thing that Bezzecchi just stood the bike up quicker than Mark and got more drive. That was the bottom line. Into a corner where he suddenly was like, oh, I'm going too fast here. But anyway, Mark and Rins, racing incident, served a long lap penalty, move on.
Agreed. Now, where I am going to disagree with you now, Paul, and Robert Swart kind of also brings up the point. Paul and Rob, I don't buy the theory that Bez got sucked in. So now I also watched the Neil Hodgson, and it does make sense in a way to me. And I'm not fully saying that Bezzecchi was going to pass there. It would have been stupid. What I'm saying is I don't think it got sucked in. I think Bez was in that Gonzalez kind of Motegi frame of mind when he got a cock start. Mark, I know he didn't show great pace on the Friday, and we didn't really get to see what he did in the Saturday sprint because of the move. But if you look at his pace after, that was actually quite good. And I think Sunday he could have been a potential dark horse for the podium potential. I think Bez looked at this and went, Mark became an anomaly pretty quickly in the sprint race, so he didn't have to worry about him. And he could do what he did in the sprint race, Bez, which was absolutely sublime. We'll touch upon Bez before we get on to the other topics after this. In that main race, got this cock start again and went, but hang on, now I've got to try and get past this Mark, which is now a different ball game altogether. This is not a Furman Aldeguer. This is not as hard as Aldeguer and Acosta and all these guys are. This is Mark Marquez, and this guy, it's going to be hard to beat him. So for me, I don't think Bez was lining up a move in that corner. I think he was certainly trying to get as close as he could to keep a tight line, to potentially go on the inside and do something with Mark. And he just got it wrong. Yeah. Someone on Facebook posted, and it was the wrong post to make. It was a good reference, but his wording was just terrible. He went on this, you see, Bez is Rossi's told him to go and take out Mark to hurt. One of those stupid comments. Yeah. But anyway, he did put flashcards of Bezzecchi doing these kind of silly things before, and he's done it 3 or 4 times where he's just taken people out from the back. Phillip Island was one of the references. I can't remember the other ones, but I just think it was one of those where he thought, I'm going to get as close to this guy as I possibly can and then try and do something, and he just misjudged it. I don't think there was anything malicious in it. I just think it was just complete misjudgment from Bezzecchi, which happens. He misjudged it. He didn't realize how close he was. And he tapped Mark, and down they went. I did, again, someone mentioned huge respect to both of them because it's that Spanish versus Italian. It's VR46 versus Mark. I did respect how Bezzecchi handled the whole thing, came out afterwards and did all that. Brilliant. So I summed that up perfectly. I think it worked. Going back to the Rins Mark, I was on the fence for a while, but then I really looked afterwards and I went, I'm surprised Simon gave that, because then there were quite a few that popped in my mind at that point when I was thinking about it yesterday, that I could have gone, well, that could have easily been a penalty then. Well, that could have easily been a penalty. Then we're getting back into this Freddie Spencer area where, for God's sake, these guys can't pass now. I think Simon's done a fantastic job until now. I think he's fixed the massive problem that was there before. But I think he missed the boat with that one, because There was the move, was it Bezzecchi on, who was it, Bez on Aldeguer or Costa in the sprint race, where it was similar. Okay, the rider didn't go as far off as Rins, but it was a very similar move. So anyway, I didn't buy that whole thing. I think there should have been a bit more racing. This is racing. If that was a penalty, then Raul Fernandez should have also got one for his move on Marini. Was it that?
Absolutely.
It was that one that I was referencing, where I looked at that and I went, okay, well, and that now, you know what I mean? So
100%.
Anyway, Pat, Simon, you got that one wrong, but pat on the back, I think you've got every single other one wrong.
Yeah, correct. And as you say, Rob, if he's got one wrong out of how many does he look at in a race weekend? Let's say it's only 10. And we've had 18 or 16 races, he's actually got it right. So, one, whether, the conspiracy theorists on the Marc Marquez side are saying now they're punishing Marc because he's won the championship. No, none of that. I think it was a 50-50 call. And my opinion, I think that he should have shown a little bit more leeway, but exactly what Wayne Taylor said there now. Then why didn't, what's his name, get punished for taking Marini, for drifting him wide? That's all he did. But then Marc put a proper block pass last week on Jean Mir. So, it's very similar. But that was, there was no touching. So I don't know. It's a difficult one. I still think because it was on lap 1, Simon was a little bit more, listen, guys, let's let the race settle down and then do this. But on the other side, you've got to make those passes early. We've seen it the whole season. If you leave it to the last, after lap 4 or 5, it's very difficult to make up more than a couple of places.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect place to end the Marc Marquez conversation. Ollie Moto, you can tune back in if you like, and anyone else that tunes out whenever we. No, Ollie, I love your comments. Love you, my man. Just keep them coming, and you're a huge asset. All of you have become a huge part of this family, and it's brilliant that we can have this open, honest, mature, there's that word again, conversation about it all. I'm going to use that a lot. Shane Sporg, I want to climb into KTM and Brad just now. I want to quickly touch upon Bezzecchi and Aldeguer and then end off on the KTM story. Bezzecchi, Mark, fantastic again. I think Jorge Martin must have been pulling his hair going, the Aprilia was working there. No disrespect to Raul Fernandez, but if he could be doing what he was doing, Martin could have been there. It's a pity that Martin, and this is going to be the problem for Martin now. When he got injured, Paul, okay, it was a stupid move. It was all his own doing. There's no doubt about it. But is this the part of his career now where he becomes a Rins or Pedrosa, every time you fall off, something breaks or something gets hurt? It's my only concern now with Martin. He does seem to have big crashes and he always gets hurt from them. But he would have been watching it on TV going, damn, this would have been my time to shine. But man, how good was Bezzecchi? He fluffed his start in the sprint race and the main race. Like, I wanted to slap him for it. But this guy, you talk about, again, that word maturity. I think that's the best word to use to sum up Bezzecchi in 2025. It's just the maturity of the guy. He has turned from a boy into a man. Aprilia have made the signing of the season for me, okay, apart from Ducati and Marc, but you expected that. You knew that was going to come. Again, don't tell me you had a crystal ball and put your hand up and say, I saw Bezzecchi doing this. I don't believe you. Incredible. It's such a pity on how it ended. And I don't know if you've heard or anyone else has heard, if he is going to get a penalty, I'm no doubt there will be a penalty coming his way. But it's a pity it ended that way, because he really could have done that perfect weekend, which he deserves, Aprilia deserve, and I hope it does come, because, with Pecco's failing, that third in the championship is still right there. After Motegi, Bezzecchi wasn't really there. We know Pecco did well, and you kind of thought, this was Bez's chance to really, could that he deserves that top 3 in the title. I'm not saying Pecco doesn't, although I am saying Pecco doesn't, if you know what I mean. Bez deserves reward at the end of what has been a phenomenal season for him.
No, absolutely. And as we've discussed, I think every round since probably the 4th round of this year, Bezzecchi has stepped up to the plate. He got thrown in the deep end. I, for one, will be the first to say when Aprilia signed him and we knew Martin was going to Aprilia, Bez was just there to fill the seat. 100%. Nobody can ever tell me different.
Yes.
Then the circumstances changed, And wow, did Bezeki step up, and all credit to him. And yeah, disappointing that what happened on Sunday in the race happened, because I think, I don't want to, you can never say he was a shoe-in for the win. I think he would have had his hands full with the way Aldeguer raced that race on Sunday. He definitely had race pace from start to finish, and he was good. You know, it's not often we see a guy build up a 9-second lead in MotoGP nowadays. But be that as it may, let's just presume Bezeki had finished second. You know, that's 20 points. I think that would have been enough, and I don't have the chart in front of me at the moment, to almost put him into third place. And at the moment, the way he's performing, he certainly deserves it, as opposed to Bagnaia, who just doesn't seem to have it. But I think all credit to Bezeki. We've said it how many times, Rob? He's just stepped up to the plate. One thing I wasn't happy with the crash. I'm really glad he's not injured. Yeah. So he goes to Phillip Island, a track the Aprilia's been good at in the past. He's good there. I think we're in for a great show the next race at Phillip Island. And he just needs to, maybe his crash on Sunday was a little bit of a Morbidelli moment where he just, as you say, he needed to get close to Mark. He panicked a little bit, not thinking, I've had the pace the whole weekend. 0.4 of a second better than everyone as a race pace. Just, I got 27 laps, I'll get past these guys. I think he might have also panicked a little bit. I'm going to agree with what Neil Hodgson said, but at the same time, he might have panicked. But be that as it may, you can't wind the clock back. He got no points. Luckily for him, Pecco got exactly the same amount of points, but it was a big opportunity for him to close that gap to claiming third in the championship, which will be a massive thing for Aprilia, because there's no way they would have expected it with Martin. Yes. And then we all know what's happened with Martin. So, yeah, I think this certainly, and I see Wayne Taylor's comment there, I certainly believe the Aprilia is the most improved bike, and Bezeki is the most improved rider of this season. Don't take away what Alex has achieved, but Alex has been riding the best bike I think that's ever been created in MotoGP. Makes your life a little bit easier.
Yes. Absolutely. Well said, and great comments from everyone on the side there. James Thompson, Robert Swart, thank you for joining. Catch up with you later. He's just buying out. He'll listen to the rest in the car. Bez has made Martin look foolish this season. Aprilia must be so thankful that he stepped up to the plate. I think that's the best way 100%. To round out the whole Aprilia story. Fermin Aldeguer, quickly, Paul. I don't think there's anything else that needs to be said that hasn't already been said. You know, we've been impressed with him this year. He's had some races where he's kind of the rookie, the learning comes into it, where it's a weekend and you grind out a result and this weekend, a weekend where even the mighty Marc Marquez couldn't get that Ducati to really work the way that we've seen Marc make it work. Pecco, we know the struggles there. The VR46 guys, Alex Marquez wasn't really there. The Ducatis just weren't really there. Unless you're Fermin Aldeguer. I mean, the guy, and it must just be feel, it must just be the confidence to trust the bike or the tire, whatever it was, he made it work. Credit to him and Frankie Carcetti. You know, there was a great stat with Frankie Carcetti, who's the one now a MotoGP races with Joan Mir, Marc Marquez, Fermin Aldeguer, Antonio, you know, so he's done a great job there. So credit must go to him, credit where credit's due. But Fermin Aldeguer just made it work. He just made it work. And so much so that even if, let's say, Marc goes to Frankie Carcetti, who he worked with last year, or Grassini or Ducati, I'm sure that he'll have access to that and go, right, what is this kid doing? Let's just copy what this kid's doing. You know, because the bike I've got is not working as well as his. So Marc would have had that option, and he still, I don't think, would have matched Aldeguer's pace. So the difference this weekend, and to say this for a rookie who I still think he's only like 20 years old, this guy.
20, yeah.
You know, he's brand new. He's a tadpole, this thing. Yeah. To say that the difference this weekend wasn't a Ducati, it wasn't a factory red bike, it wasn't any. The difference this weekend was Fermin Aldeguer.
Yeah.
And for him to win his first race going, personally, it wasn't a case that if Marc and Bez had crashed, Fermin would have still been there. I do believe. But Fermin can look back at this and go, I was the difference. I made it work this weekend and I won. And for a rookie in the championship of this caliber to be able to do what he did, it blew my mind. You know, I was kind of sitting there waiting, going, "Oh, Furman, this is great, and I want you to win, but you do know it's 60-degree track temperature, and you do know your tire's going to fade. You do know you're going to tuck the front in one of these corners because everyone's crashing. You do know you have to slow down." And he just didn't. 30 point something, 30 point something, 30 point something. And he went and dominated the race. So I was amazed. I was blown back. I sat there going, holy smokes, this guy's just taught the cream of the crop in MotoGP how to ride a motorbike on a tricky surface.
Yeah, Rob, and if you go back 18 months ago when Ducati signed him, and as soon as they signed him in the balance of that Moto2 year, he had a bit of a shocker.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, geez, what have Ducati seen in this guy? Well, I think Sunday proved what they had seen in him. And according to Matt Burt, the commentary that we get in South Africa, Matt Burt says this is one of the guys with, in the old days, last year and the year before, they always said that Bastianini was the absolute best at conserving his tire for the last third of a race. Now, Matt Burt seems to think that Aldeguer has taken over that mantle. So tricky track conditions on Sunday and a guy who knows how to conserve his tire, well, you just saw what he could do. And I think it's a little bit of a worry for his teammate because suddenly Alex was like, wow, this kid has just ridden away from everybody. But yeah, big ups to him. I think credit to Carcetti. He clearly knows how to manage people, race strategies, get that mindset right, tell him exactly how he needs to control the race from start to finish. And yeah, I think it was a fantastic showing by Fermin Aldeguer. And honestly, I would never have put money on the fact of him winning a race before Pedro Acosta, even though Acosta's not on a Ducati. I didn't think that would happen. Obviously, the KTM, which I'm sure we're still going to discuss, is a little bit of a hamstring for Pedro Acosta versus a Ducati. But like you say, this weekend it was Fermin Aldeguer. I don't believe it was the big advantage of running on a Ducati. I think he made the difference.
Comments here from Coleman Fisher and Wayne Taylor kind of sum it up perfectly in many ways, especially Wayne's comment here of Fermin still riding a bit like a Moto2. Apparently, we've seen them before where rookies can make it work on certain tracks at times. Yeah. And if you think of Moto2 where there's no electronic aids, there's no traction control, it's all, feathering the throttle, and the Triumphs have got good low down torque, so you really have to manage that torque. Was that the difference this weekend? Or that Moto2 Fermin coming out and playing and managing the slide, managing the feel that this hard carcass rear tire was giving. It was obviously folding and flexing and doing a lot of things that were putting the other riders off. That the electronics cut out and work when the tire's moving, when traction's braking and whatever. So are these guys still riding like the way they know, like this, and the tire wasn't working, slipping, which caused the traction to kick in, all these kind of factors. And there's Fermin just able to ride the slides more or ride the electronics better, whatever. So very good comment from Wayne Taylor. I think that's a very good point to make. Coleman Fisher, Fermin loves the heat and the track. Others suffer big time, and his pace was unbelievable. Never expected that from him. Not even Pecco or Mark had that grip. And you know what it is? I mean, it was such a curveball, this Indonesia, Paul. It was great. And I know people also went and said, you look how good the racing is if Mark's not in it. So first of all, do you want Mark to slow down to wait for everyone?
Yeah, exactly.
Again, that's when people put that on MotoGP supporters, and it's a mate of mine that should know what he's talking about, but he just hates Marc Marquez so much that he puts stupid comment. I want to say his name and call him out so that people can realize it, but I won't. But when I see comments like that, I'm like, please. Anyway, it was brilliant to see Raul Fernandez, Pedro Acosta, Fermin Aldeguer, Luca Marini, Joan Mir, and I'm not going to harp on about Marini, but again, just credit to him and Honda and where they're going, because Zarco's become the back end of that whole conversation.
Exactly.
It's crazy. It's manic. We can touch upon that when we have more time in the later shows, but credit there. But it is that different. It was brilliant, and the racing was better. But it's exactly what Brad did, and this is a perfect introduction into KTM. Brad came out afterwards and said it was brilliant. The being competitive again in fourth place, it was brilliant. But how serious do you take it? how much salt do you take with it? Because it was such a curveball that, and I'm not saying what Brad and KTM did was brilliant, but it was such a curveball to everyone. The Yamahas ran a soft rear tire, which gave them pace at the beginning, but they lost it at the end. Pecco and Mark weren't in the equation. Bezzecchi crashed out. Martin wasn't there. So there were all these factors. It was a special race, I think, is what Brad called it. It was a special situation. Take nothing away from him, but you can't now look at that result, and I'm certainly not that naive, because I think we all have done it before, where we go, this is it. Brad, KTM, yes, they are back. I can't wait. They're going to dominate everything. And then they could potentially go to Phillip Island and be in 7th, 8th, and 9th, and qualifying 17th again type thing. So it was just such a spanner in the works. But what I was impressed with, Paul, with the KTM side, and I really saw the two sides that is KTM at the moment. There's the Vinales that shouldn't be out there. Paul Espargaro should be on that bike. Vinales should be doing what Mark's doing and heal up, because that injury is not going to go anywhere. You're riding a 300 horsepower animal that's going to try and rip your shoulders out of its socket at any point. You've got a shoulder injury. Go home, be with your family, rest up, come back when you're fit and fine. You are doing no one any favors riding around in 18th, 19th, not completing races, not getting data, when you've got a perfectly good Paul Espargaro sitting right there first. Then you've got a Bastianini who's got a love-hate relationship with the KTM at the moment. Loved it when it was working, and now it's not working, and now he's going, oh, it's not fair. Pedro's got this chassis and this shock and this everything that I don't have because of this, the financial reasons. Right. KTM can only afford X amount, and I would love to try what Pedro's got. So, but then I really look at Pedro and Brad as the yardstick here. I look at a Brad who knows the limitations of the KTM and rides within those limitations. He's going, I want to go faster, but if I do, I'm going to crash this bike. So this is where I'm at. And as frustrating as it is in qualifying and the race, this is where I'm at. I can make this bike work at this pace for 30 laps, as we saw on Sunday, where while the others fade, I can maintain or get better. But this is the limitation of the bike, and I'm not willing to push past that. I can't, because when I do, I crash, and that's no good to anyone. No good to me in the championship, no good to KTM and Data. Where on the other side, you've got this Pedro Acosta, who does push past the limitations. When he gets away with it, qualifies well, is fast, great, gets good results. We've seen brilliant results from Pedro, and that's the difference. But then there's the times where, again, in the sprint race we saw on Saturday, where it doesn't work. The KTM says, I have limitations. Sorry for you. Get off me. Goodbye. And then Brad is the blue-eyed boy, the only KTM finishing once again. And I saw that on a word. And then on Sunday, Pedro, to his credit, I was waiting.
Yeah, exactly.
No disrespect to him, but I was waiting for Pedro to tuck that front, because, man, he put up a fight. Listen, I'll give it to him. Even when Marini, when he didn't have the pace and he was backing everyone up, and he literally had a train behind him. Marini, Ralph Fernandez, all these guys, they passed him. He passed them back, and he said, I'm going to hold on to this position. Even when Alex Marquez got past him, I thought, okay, well, this is the end of the... he fought back, and it was brilliant. Well done to Pedro. But I definitely saw the two sides of it. So, yes, Pedro is the better KTM performing ride at the moment. The results don't lie. Olimoto has always reminded us about stats. The stats are there. But again, it highlighted this weekend of that two differences of limitations. I'm not going to disrespect those limitations. And Pedro going, what limitations? Oh, yeah, those limitations. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, you're quite right. Just going back to the Maverick Vinales story. So he goes there, does Friday, and then says, okay, I'm not unfit for the rest of the weekend. Exactly the point you're making, Rob. If they had put Paul Espargaro on the bike from Friday morning, they're gathering more data, where now they get nothing from his side of the box. Bastianini, we know the story, I'm sure you've seen, with Carlo Pernat saying now, oh no, but KTM sold them a dummy when they signed the contract, because the week after or whatever, then this oak left and that oak, and surely KTM knew that. Whether that's valid or not, I hear the comments, I hear what he says. Now they're looking at excuses. Brad, maybe we need Brad to come out and say things like that, but Brad doesn't. Brad gets on the bike, and like you say, rides to what he believes is the best he can get out of the bike, because the goal is to finish. Doesn't help like Pedro in the sprint race, whatever lap it was that he crashes, lap 2 or 3. That doesn't help. Brad will ride to the limits. Pedro, I don't think it's a bad thing that he's pushing the limit all the time, because it's helping Brad move forward.
Sure.
So to a point, you also can't crash every single weekend, because not only are you wasting money, which they don't have, and you're not getting the data, there's also the risk, like with Mark, you can get injured, which we don't want to see. But going to Sunday's race, I think we saw the best of Pedro Acosta as a racer. He's there to race. Nobody scares him. And if he's going to be able to pass you back, he will pass you back and block you for the rest of the race to get on that podium. And then we saw Brad running identical pace, just for me, Brad Binder's style, looking completely in control. He just looked like the Brad Binder of old. He could almost put the bike where he wanted to, a little bit of sideways into the turns now and again, on the gas, running exactly the same pace as Pedro Acosta. So to me, I think it was a good weekend for them. Brad saying, now they've found something. He always says that. I'm looking forward to 2 weeks' time to see if they can carry that forward. But definitely, that's why Brad and Pedro are in the factory team, because they're the two that they're doing what KTM expect them to be doing. And I think this weekend for them was a very good weekend. Certainly not their best. But as a team, the factory team, as a collective, what a fantastic weekend for them, especially Sunday. Pedro racing like a pure racer, and Brad, not to say he's not a pure racer, he just makes it look so simple when things are easy for him.
He does. Like I said, I was watching Pedro going, well, this guy's going to crash any second now. As I watched Brad, and it did look a lot more in control, especially when it was coming the end of the race, tires were gone and everything, and it shouldn't have looked as in control as it was. And Brad did a fantastic job, and it should be a big confidence boost. I like the fact that Brad came out and says, it's brilliant, take nothing away from it, but we've got to live in reality and go that this was a very special race, and but we've got to carry the momentum forward. But I do, as you said, I think that relationship's working well. I think KTM have got a good combination of Pedro, you go push the boundaries, we'll find the limitations and the boundaries and then work with that. Brad, you keep bringing the consistent kind of data home and that we can actually use. You're not costing us a lot of money. Pedro, it's great that you're doing this, but you are costing us a lot of money. And that's, to me, that's the detriment more of Vinales and certainly Bastianini now, because they can't get faulted these parts, because KTM have got to keep feeding Pedro the main parts. He's the number one rider. Brad is hopefully also on these. KTM have been very suspect on what bikes they actually, four exact same KTMs out there. There's not four exact same KTMs out there. You can't afford four of the same KTMs out there. So anyway, it was brilliant. The only thing I did feel for Pedro Acosta, Oli Moto says, and I agree with you fully, Oli Moto, it would be great to see Acosta on a Ducati. When I watch him this weekend, you do go, we had this conversation a couple of weeks ago where we went, right, who in this current field, if you put them on a Ducati, would actually week in, week out challenge Mark? And we know Brad will challenge and be a lot better. Would he challenge week in, week out Mark Marquez? Pedro Acosta was one of the names everyone kind of mentioned. But I did feel sorry for him. How hard that must have been. We've all been told this relationship that him and Fermin Aldeguer have from the same town. They used to be best friends. Then one night, Pedro Acosta stole Fermin's jammies and he pissed in them by accident. Then they became the worst. I don't know what happened, but they became the worst enemies. And then they've kind of got to a mutual point where it looks like there's a mutual respect. But Pedro must have sat there gone, I'm the next star of MotoGP. I'm the man. I'm this dominant force. I am now 2 years into my MotoGP career and I have not won yet. You are but 9 months into your MotoGP, 10 months into your MotoGP career, and that couldn't have been an easy thing for Pedro Acosta to see. So someone put in the comments here as well, count Pedro as a favorite for Phillip Island. And listen, Mark, Paul, I'm going to jump on the bandwagon here and say, in a way, I am excited that Mark's not at Phillip Island in Sepang, because it does give the opportunity. This is going to light a candle up everyone's arse. Everyone, as soon as that news broke, or as soon as they saw him crash, went, right, it's our time to shine. And if they're not thinking like that, well, then there's something wrong with you. This is the perfect opportunity. Anyone can win now. Anyone can go to Phillip Island now and win. So that excites me a lot. Another point I wanted to quickly make that's just coming to my mind now. I do also feel sorry for Jorge Martin. Your lifelong dream is to win a MotoGP title, and you do that. And you're a MotoGP champion for 9 months.
Yeah.
Mark goes and wins it in 9 months. You're effectively a MotoGP champion. And I do feel for Martin because he was never really recognized as this year's champion. He was, but do you know what I mean? He never really got to show us that he was the world champion. So I do hope he can come back and show it. But anyway, it's exciting going forward. And I think the next 2 races are going to be very, very, very interesting.
Yeah, listen, from my point of view, very disappointing that Mark won't be at Phillip Island because it's one of his favorite tracks.
Sure.
But like you say, now it's time for everyone else to step up. I think Bezecchi's going to just dominate. I really do. I think he's going to get there. He's going to have a point to prove after his error this past weekend. And the form he's on, he's certainly going there as the form man. So it'll be very interesting to see. You can never count out the Pedro Costas, the Fermin Aldeguers, as he's showing now. Quartararo probably will be on pole because he's very fast there, and it's a flowing track. The Yamaha likes that. And for one lap, I wouldn't be surprised if he sticks it on pole there. Whether he'll last the distance, I think the Yamaha realistically is a good 6th, 7th, 8th place finisher. Luca Marini has surprised the heck out of me. Absolutely. I think he got done in by Ralph Fernandez for a possible podium on Sunday. But certainly he's been the Honda man of the last, 6 or 8 races. Zarco, has even been there. Very disappointing to me after the start that we had. So I know we're looking forward to Phillip Island because it's always one of the best racetracks. Let's hope it doesn't rain. When it's dry there, it's absolutely magnificent to watch. I always look forward to that race. But as you say, with Mark not being there and being fit, it doesn't matter. He needs to be fit to race there because of it being such a fast circuit. I just think that this coming weekend or 2 weeks' time, it's open to anybody. So if you want it, you've got to go there and grab it with both hands because the win is there, certainly.
Michelle Lewis, good comment. I can't wait to see Acosta when he matured. You see, now Michelle's listening. Mature was our word of the day, and she's using it perfectly there. Well done. Wayne Taylor makes a good point for you, Paul. Bez will have a penalty for sure.
Yeah, that's also true. Yeah.
Wait and see how that affects him. But it's one of those races where it is. It's open cards now, and it's up to everyone to kind of put their name at the forefront and see, right, Mark's not there now. We all bitched. Everyone in the paddock, out the paddock, everyone's bitched. Well, the main man's not there now, so who's going to step up and be the main man? Shane Sparg, so Brad's future, I think he's cemented himself with KTM with what he's done the last. I know it was a tricky start at the beginning of the year and an end. I think Brad proved again his value as a MotoGP rider. Yes, maybe he's not going to win you a world title. I kind of the proof is there, but what you get out of him is exactly what you saw on Sunday. A rider that will give you the best every single lap, a rider that'll make the best out of a bad situation, a rider that'll bring home data, a rider that'll work, a rider that'll just give you everything you want, play the PR game, do it, everything. So 100%. I think KTM have got the perfect kind of concoction there, if you like. They got the immature for now, go wild, balls to the wall, Pedro Costa, and then that stable, reliable Brad Binder who can bring it home no matter what. Just got to sort out that qualifying. That qualifying is just if we can sort that out, it's a different ball game. But anyway, that's
and unfortunately, Rob, we've said it many times. It's become such an issue. It's not like even I'm going to say 5 years ago. If you qualified first 3 rows, you were fine. Now it's become vital. That's why there's so much emphasis. In fact, there's Friday afternoon is the most important part of a GP weekend, because if you have a good qualifying, you're going to have a good race, almost guaranteed. Yes. If you have a poor qualifying, it is so difficult because of the aero evolvement of MotoGP bikes and the limiting of all the whole shot devices, lowering the ride height devices. It's made the bikes very equal in terms of, yes, so we know the Yamaha lacks a bit of top speed, but their drive out of the corners is as good as almost anybody else. So even the Yamaha, it's very difficult. You don't just cruise past the Yamaha to overtake them. And it's made the racing, I don't want to say closer, definitely closer, but that's because it's more difficult to overtake. Like we saw with Pedro. How many Oaks did he have backing up behind him? There must have been 7 of them. I think they said 3rd to 10th were in one row at one point, you know. That's because it's difficult to overtake. And yeah, certain tracks are harder than others. But yeah, I think it's boiled down to a point now where we're going to need someone to break the mold, step out. Pedro could do it. Brad certainly, he's in the mix for this coming weekend. As I said, I think Quartararo is going to be a dark horse. He loves the track, as does everyone, but the Yamaha's good there. So, yeah, we'll see how it pans out.
Paul, I think that's the perfect way to end it. To everyone on TikTok, in the land of live TikTok, my beautiful son Tracia sent me a message saying, good luck. Thank you, my boy. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you to everyone for tuning in to our first ever live TikTok. It's on my personal TikTok, so it's Robert Portman. Just look out for that. I think it's at Rob Portman 86 or something. Sand Club, to my beautiful sister who has the Sand Club out in I want to say Wimbledon, but I know it's not Wimbledon. It's somewhere close in Wimbledon. I'm still terrible. I have to follow the blue line on my GPS wherever I go. Yeah, so look up Sand Club on Facebook. If you've got little kids and you're in the London area, you need somewhere to go, that's the perfect place to take them. And to everyone, as always, just we've built, Paul, you know, myself, you, Ollie Moto, Shane Spot, everyone in the comments, Wayne Taylor, we've built up such a great community where we can have good honest conversations. I know there was a little bit of banter between Ollie and a couple of guys, but it's relatively kept neat and tidy. I think we've built up a good, trustworthy, I'm going to use the word again, mature community. And I think it's brilliant. We all love the sport. We all love talking about the sport, and long may it continue. And I look forward to our next chat, which is, Phillip Island. I'm so excited. It must come. It must come.
Yeah, 100%. I always think it generally pans out to be, I don't want to say always the best race of the year, but certainly every year it's the top 3, without a doubt. So I always look forward to it. It's just, there's something about it. As I say, the weather can throw a spanner in the works. Let's just hope it's dry and not too much wind.
Cool. On that note, Paul, thank you so much. Thank you to each and every one of you in the comments, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. Just makes my Tuesday night. So thank you so much, and have a great week further, great weekend, and we'll catch up with you after Phillip Island talking MotoGP.
Thanks, Rob. To everyone who tuned in, enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll catch up in a couple of weeks. Cheers.